Earlier this week I was contacted by a police department. They wanted to know if I had heard any rumors about protests on November 4th. As a matter of fact, I had. There's been a lot of chatter online about them. There's a group called Refuse Fascism, and they say their single unifying mission is to drive out the Trump-Pence regime. There are nationwide protests planned for November 4th called It Begins. The nightmare must end. The Trump-Pence regime must go. But the big question is it going to be this type of protest?
45th President of the United States of America, Donald.
Or this type?
March, let us march, let us march.
Let's take a deeper look. Grab your seats. It's time for Counter-Terrorism Roll Call. Welcome to Counter-Terrorism Roll Call. I'm your host, Holt Clark. Many of you have heard rumors lately about protests on November 4th. And I understand, you're very busy. You don't have time to chase down every rumor or investigate every internet meme. One of the things this program tries to do is to provide officers with informative and efficient information about events such as these. So here are the basics. The group calling for these protests is called Refuse Fascism. And I like to use primary source, direct source information. So I go to their website, refusefascism.org. It's a very well organized website. It's big, has lots of information, and they appear to be very social media savvy. They have a national, well organized network, and they have funding. Here's what they say they want. They envision expanding protests that grow so large it comes to the point where the President of the United States and the Vice President have to step down.
There is only one way. There is only one way for us to bring justice and bring tolerance back to our national life, and that is for us to protest, to hit the streets, and to demand the removal of this regime this coming November 4th.
Now, these are pretty high ideas, and they're a pretty idealistic group. And from their website, they appear to preach nonviolence. So here's how they say they're going to do it. Refuse Fascism claims the preferred tactics include phone banks and spreading memes on the internet, putting up signs and giving news interviews, and a thing called a zombie street party, as well as street theater.
I'm taking me with us. Taking me against white supremacy.
What bothers me is the tone of their language and some of the wording that they use. It's something that I'm very familiar with. It is designed to encourage action. There are statements that say you really need to be part of something bigger than yourself, and the end is near. You must act now. This is the same language and tone that's used by the global jihad to recruit people into ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But let's take them at their word. Let's say that they are preaching nonviolence. The problem is they're very closely related to some bad actors. They're linked with or speaking directly to groups who use more aggressive, illegal tactics in their protests, like blocking roads and vandalism, arson, and assault. The website is literally one click away from these groups: communists, anarchists, Antifa, and many others.
The Trump-Pence regime must go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. A better world is possible. We are confronted by, we are now being ruled by a fascist regime.
Where are these protests planned? Well, if you see on the map, they're set for big cities like Boston and New York and LA, Cleveland, Philly, Atlanta, San Francisco, and Seattle. And each of these locations has more information. There's Facebook pages, email, phone numbers, and contacts, and an exact location where to meet. But it's not just these big cities. There are The website is designed to encourage individuals and small groups to take action for themselves. Think of it as franchising the protest. Everything you need, the media talking points, the chants, the posters, the signs, the information on how to recruit people, that's all online, ready for you to download and use to build your own protest. When you analyze what they're doing, when you just look at this website, I come away with a few things. There's some pros and there's some cons. First, on the good side, the advantages. The protests are scheduled for larger cities, and they have more resources to handle this, and that's good. Refuse Fascism appears to be a very idealistic group, and I don't see any calls directly for violence, vandalism, or even civil disobedience like blocking the streets. And at this point, I don't see any direct counter-protests being organized, and I think that's key to not having the other side show up. Now, some of the cons, some of the disadvantages. Refuse Fascism is only 1 degree. They're linked to the groups that have a history of violent and criminal tactics during the protest. They could simply be a front group for these others. They could be the way that the Aryan Nation white supremacists have always used skinheads as their shock troops. It could be the way that the Sinn Féin was the political arm of the military IRA. There's no direct evidence of that, but again, some of the language that they use seems to be encouraging more immediate action, or else there are dire world-ending consequences. The whole language and tone encourages the individuals to act. And that's great, that's fine, well within their rights. But it also could encourage the lone wolf types to take violent action. Now, these protests may be localized to the big cities, but they could very easily grow. They may be very peaceful, but don't underestimate the potential for violence. The recent history of violence that's associated with these groups demands caution from your department. And remember, there are dangerous people who would like to do harm to these protesters. They've received death threats, and they may need your protection during these protests. And there's a potential for bad results goes up greatly when the other side shows up and they're ready for a fight. What should your department do? At a minimum, your officers should be aware of the November 4th date and the basic facts laid out here. I recommend all officers watch this video. They should be aware of what recent events are taking place in your area. For example, 1 week prior to the November 4th date, there are protests, major protests and counter-protests scheduled in Middle Tennessee. That could have a Charlottesville effect if that one is to go bad. Know what's planned specifically for your area. The best way to do that is through social media. Look for Facebook pages, but specifically pay attention to Twitter. Use hashtags to search for these groups. Use terms like your city connected with Refuse Fascism, hashtag it begins, or hashtag Antifa, November 4th. Use these to find out what's happening in your area and what's planned. Remember, it's your job to keep these legal protests safe, but it's also your duty to go home in one piece at the end of the night. Until next time on Counterterrorism Roll Call, be alert and be safe. Thanks for watching. Please visit our sponsor, PatriotThreads.org, and stay tuned for a special offer from them. Would you do me a favor and hit the like button? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. If you want to know more about me, go to my website, follow me on Twitter, or just run me on NCIC. I'll see you next week on Counterterrorism Roll Call. Until then, be alert, be safe.
PatriotThreads.org is apparel with a purpose. Patriot Threads offers state-themed, game day to outdoor lifestyle apparel, like the new line of Southern Trout shirts, and introducing the new Back the Blue shirts. All are 100% printed in the USA. Are you looking for a new, exciting, profitable fundraiser? PatriotThreads.org would love to help. Go to their website for details. Use promo code ROLLCALL at checkout and you can save 20% on the sale. And Patriot Threads will donate 20% of the profits to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. PatriotThreads.org is a proud sponsor of the men and women of law enforcement.